Welcome to the Leaders and Legends podcast. My name is Michael Calamaras, and as host, it's my mission to bring you unique guests and share their stories so you may learn from their journey, their challenges, but also find inspiration in their successes. So give it a listen, take some notes. If you get some value of what you hear today, please share the show and follow us wherever you're at on social media. All right. Hey, Michelle.
Hey.
So happy to have you here. I want to introduce Michelle, CEO of 40 Carats Family Center here in town. We've met years ago now.
I know.
Volunteering and
Before you had your own family.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Time flies. I was through Wine, Women and Shoes. You're, one of the big fundraisers for the organization we met, and we'll talk more about that, but because it's so special. But I do want to share a little about you, and I want to share about your journey and sort of how you ended up where you are now and some of the things you're working on now, which are, pretty important and making a large impact in the community. But you have a background in psychology, from your studies, and a lot of leadership experience, not just in nonprofit, but before that. So how did you get started with 40 Carats?
So that is a long story. I do have a psychology degree. I went for my interview to get my master, to enter a master's program way back. And I don't know why, but I got out of that interview and I said to myself, I don't know that I want to do this for my life. So I took a completely different path and I went into business and I ended up as a partner in a furniture import company.
That's cool.
And it was amazing. I would have never... It was a chance happening. I was working for a company, and the person who would be my future partner, who was really my mentor, she was the very first woman importer out of New York in the 60s.
Oh, wow.
And I learned so much from her. It was amazing. And I got to travel the world. We did product development overseas, Europe and Asia, and also sold to mass merchant retailers in the States, many of whom don't even exist anymore. I'm totally dating myself. So I did that for about 12 years. And then I had a baby. So when she was 6 months old, I had to go to Bangkok to finalize a deal with a customer.
Yeah.
And I came back and I said, I don't think I'm going to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And that really changed my personal trajectory.
Okay.
And so that's how we ended up in Sarasota.
Oh, wow.
I'm from Boston. That's where I moved from.
Yeah.
Although I've lived in a lot of different places in my life. But that's how we got here. And if you tote around a toddler around this town, a lot of people said, are you going to 40 Carats? And I didn't know what 40 Carats was. And back then there was no internet to check it out. So I went to the building and they said, well, we have all of these things available. Why don't you sign up for this particular group? Which I did, and I paid for it. And I thought it was just a play class. But from the first time that I went, I could see, oh my gosh, it was so much more. And I saw what I was getting out of it as a mom, not having a clue what I was doing, raising this person that we're supposed to, one day have a productive human being after however many years. Yeah. And that's when I started getting involved. So I kept going there. I met tons of wonderful people through that process. But as a part of it, looking at what they were doing for the community, for people who weren't as fortunate as I, that really changed my mind. So I started volunteering. I did all kinds of jobs there. I did fundraising. I worked at the front desk.
Yeah, you did it all. I saw that on your resume there.
I've done almost every job. Sort of the joke of it was, I got this because they didn't know what to do with me next. And both of my girls, I since then had another child, and we went through all the parenting groups together. My girls went to preschool there, which was a magical learning experience. And then when they went to elementary school, they asked me to be on the board. And I went back to work elsewhere, and I did. I sat on the board for several years. And during that time, that was when our founder, Betsy Kane Hartnett, was retiring.
Yeah.
And so one of my fellow board members actually was the one who suggested to me that I should think about applying for the job. And I thought, no, what would I be doing in nonprofit management?
Yeah.
I'm not a teacher. I'm not a mental health therapist, although I have the psychology
Yeah, the
background,
degree. Yeah.
and have always been a student of human behavior. And of course, having children, then I was totally sucked in to child development and figuring out um, the best way to be the best mom and best family that we can for
Yeah.
our kids. So um, I acquiesced and I said, okay, I will put my hat in the ring, but really, I don't want to be kicked off the board or anything. If I'm not the right person, like that's okay. I'm okay with that. I care about 40 carats and I want this place to be the best it can be.
Yeah.
Um, and in the end, I was lucky and they picked me. And that was almost 11 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And you've done everything. And you know, it's the more I talk with people in leadership, those who are doing a good job of it, that is, because to be a leader, people want to follow you, and some people get put in positions where they're not quite the right fit. But you've done everything, right? You've done all the front desk job. You've done, you probably broomed the floor at one point, right? So, but you hear that. It's like, I've done everything. I don't ask people to do things that maybe I wouldn't do. And I feel like people appreciate that when they're following somebody. You mentioned something a little bit back about a mentor. I was going to ask you about that a little later, but I want to ask you about it now.
Sure.
So mentors being so important, right? Tell me more about that experience and sort of what it means to have a mentor, because I think it's so valuable. People often forget that, some of the best people in the world have coaches, even at the top of their game, and to have people to ask questions to. So share a little bit more about the mentorship that you got.
Yes. So it wasn't a formal thing. I
Yeah.
don't even think back then I realized what was happening. But I had this amazing person who had just a treasure trove of experience, who believed in me
Mm.
and took me under their wing and said, I can see in you where you can go. So I want to teach you.
Mm.
But the beauty of that was we had a mutual respect. Even though I was way younger than her, I didn't have nearly the experience. I had no idea what I was doing, getting into, importing. That's
Right.
a huge business and quite complex. And dealing with both manufacturing side and also the sales side in retail, two very different worlds, and being able to navigate both and teaching me how to deal with different people in different ways and still come out with a positive result.
Nice.
So she was just somebody who believed in my abilities, and
That's cool.
she allowed me to do that.
Yeah.
And she would say, even when I was nervous, which I was nervous all the time,
Sure.
all the time, she would say, you can do this. I have no qualms about you doing it on your own. You go ahead. Obviously, she didn't just look at me and have confidence in my abilities. I started out at the bottom,
Yeah.
and we were actually working at the same place at the same time. My former boss was her very, very dear friend, and her husband had passed away, and he had coaxed her out of her self-imposed retirement. And that's where we met. And then she ended up moving on and starting again another business of her own, and I went with her, and that's how that whole thing started. So
There we go. Relationships, and you never know where you're going to find them.
Relationships, they're
Yeah,
key in
that's
life,
awesome.
and they
Yeah.
make the difference.
That's really awesome. And fast forward, here we are now. You have an expansion going on, and you've raised millions of dollars over the course of your career there. But now you're overseeing, I think, 3 campuses, right? Tell me about some of that as a like the challenges. I know you were mentioning earlier you had some challenges with what's going on with the new location, but just in general, as you've had to expand the impact, right? You're adding employees and staff. You're adding clients. 6,000 now you're serving at almost,
That's
I think,
right.
and 90% of them no cost, right? Or more.
94%
No
this year.
cost. Wow, that's awesome. So that's free parenting help, and it's so impactful in our community. What are some of the challenges you're facing as you've sort of gone through all these iterations of growth?
So many, always, growth and change are inherent to everything, and there's always, problems and solutions.
Sure.
But you said it, relationships are key. And so surrounding yourself with people who have the same values, but are not yes people. Though that surrounding yourself with people who are um, going to give their perspective and strongly. But of course, leadership means decision making.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's really hard
Yeah.
because sometimes those answers are not black and white.
Right.
There's a lot of gray, as there is in life. Personally, my guiding star is what's the right thing to do and how do we get there? And if there is no clear path, how do you do it with the least amount of damage
Yeah.
or detriment? Um, Always keeping in mind everybody has their life to live, right? We want to bring people along when you know you're doing a good thing. That's the big difference, I think, between private business and nonprofit leadership. There's inherently a different outlook on what you're doing overall.
Mm.
And when you know that you are really changing somebody's life, it just gives a whole different meaning
Sure.
to the work that you do. And we are a family center. So
Yeah.
parenting education, mental health services, and early education. And they are so intertwined, you can't really pull them apart.
Yeah.
And giving kids that strong base, which means strong
Yeah. And
relationships.
you're feeling that impact day to day in what you're doing, right? You're not sort of disconnected from any of the end impact.
No, not at all. And so when I came on board, of course, 40 Carats is 31 years old. So I inherited an amazing foundation.
Sure.
And the board and the leadership, then everyone had the same goal of expanding services and expanding access, and knowing that what we provide to the community is important and meaningful, and there aren't a lot of people doing it. And even if they are, it's not there for people who can't afford to pay.
Mm.
So having that singular focus, how do we do that with the highest quality always?
Sure.
And when I took this position, our mental health work had just begun. So that first year, I believe we did 50 individual sessions. This past year, we did 2,500.
Yeah.
Our current staff count overall is about 58 and growing with this new facility. So
Wow.
we're anticipating 100% increase in mental health services.
How do you balance that these sort of the quantity versus the quality? You mentioned quality being so hard. How are you balancing that? What's some of the things you're doing to make that feasible? I mean, to raise a lot of money to hire those people, right? And then expand the reach. What's been the focus there?
So focusing on staff is key.
Yeah.
That's it. What do we need to do as an organization to provide a place that, number one, they want to come to work,
Yeah.
that they feel their role is meaningful, and also giving them all of the educational and professional development opportunities.
Mm,
So professional development is really baked into our entire system. It's not a one-off.
that's cool.
And you can't do it that way.
Yeah.
And everything that 40 Carats does is based on research and best practices. So we're constantly learning. I mean, that's part of the
Yeah.
culture.
It's a culture.
Exactly. And we're constantly saying, okay, what are we doing? And now this new piece of information has come out. How do we incorporate that and making sure that what we're doing is effective?
Sure.
And that's another piece that we always are looking through the lens of we're not interested in just doing activities. We want to make a change.
Got it.
How do we measure that? And behavior change is how we measure it. So that's a huge piece of our work, and knowing that we're actually doing what we're saying we're doing.
Yeah. 100%, right? It's not just face value. It's the result. You're seeing the result of that. The culture piece is a big deal for me, and it always comes up in conversation, like what culture are we building, right? And it's one thing to say we have this culture, nothing to actually do it, and everyone to be really bought in, not just like, hey, yeah, this is our culture, but not really, as I've been in places like that as well, right? Where it's like, yeah, there was like
Absolutely.
a 40% penetration of the culture. The rest of it was like, yeah, we're involved in the culture, quote unquote, right? How do you perpetuate and maintain that culture as you can, whether it's self-development, just people being bought in and there for the right reasons? Obviously, nonprofit, the way people get compensated is different. So finding good people, how do you perpetuate that culture as you expand, into multiple locations with more people? And where's the future for all this too?
Right, and that's scary.
Yeah.
Our original campus, which is the big Kane campus,
Yeah.
on Tuttle, that was 40 carats from the beginning.
Yeah.
When we purchased the small building across the street, that became our first therapy center with two therapy rooms. Even just being across the street that we could walk across, we saw what changes happen, and just even the emotional attachment,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that folks had to one another, and coming up with ways to make sure that we were providing opportunities for everyone to still be able to interact, even if they weren't seeing each other every
Mm,
day. And of course, with this new campus, which is on Cattleman,
yeah.
so 5 miles away,
Sure.
how do we ensure that every department and all of the staff, no one feels disconnected?
Mm,
And so we've come up with ways that we hope will work, but knowing that it may not, and we
yeah.
will be flexible. And we've asked staff.
Yeah.
That was one of our in January, we have an all staff meeting, and that was one of our exercises. What would you like to see as a part of this really huge move? What would make you feel more connected
Yeah.
to your coworkers, to management? And we decided, as a part of the operation, none of the executive management would only have one office. So we will be flexible, going back and
Yeah.
forth and being there and having FaceTime,
That's
and
good.
that it matters.
Yeah. Be around your people. Like going back to what you said before, I've done everything. I will be around everywhere. Right. And yeah, that's great. Um, so the more I look around, the more I see sort of guys like me in leadership roles. Say white dudes in leadership roles, and it's across a lot of industries. We see it everywhere. So I was happy to hear about your mentor, and she was a woman, and she owned a business, and she did her own thing. And here you are, right, leading this great organization. Tell me about that as a leader, like challenges or things that inspire you about this and where we are today as a society with that piece of things.
So it's really interesting. And of course, looking back at things is a very different perspective than
Yeah.
when I was going through it. I was super fortunate to have met Reba, and she was my person, and especially in back then in the retail industry, a mass merchant retail industry,
Yeah.
huge male influence there. I learned a lot from those experiences.
Yeah.
And it is interesting. And men and women aren't the same, right?
Yeah.
And we don't necessarily treat each other the same, whether that's right or wrong.
Right.
And so just being able to navigate that, I'm a huge proponent for everyone understanding psychology.
Yeah.
It's really hard if you don't understand yourself nor how people work. I think that was the greatest gift that I gave myself, that I didn't even know I was doing at the
Yeah.
time. I was just going where I was super interested. And so, sure, I have the same stories that
Yeah.
are out there for women in
Sure.
in leadership positions. Um, I did not have the same experiences only because of my situation. I was in a woman-owned business
Yeah.
back then, and so the people that I was dealing with that were males, and there were a lot of discriminatory practices, but they were our customers. it's a very different
Yeah.
it's a very different
Yeah.
thing
Oh, yeah.
than being in that culture of work. So
Sure.
we could set our own boundaries where that was concerned.
Right.
And I think I also had the benefit of Reba having that respect of people. So if there were things that were not okay, she had no problem stepping in and saying, back off.
Yeah. That's good. That's awesome.
So, and I have two girls
Yeah.
who are young adults now, 21 and almost 24. So your question back to, what inspires me
Yeah.
about what I see now, I'm amazed at how young women are facing challenges that they have and really stepping up and using their voices.
Mm.
I don't know that I grew up exactly that way. And that really inspires me.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
they've made me, I think, a better person.
That's great. Yeah. I have two young girls as well. And well, they are fiery. So I'm interested to see what they're going to do, and whatever they do, we'll support them. Yeah, that's I appreciate you sharing that, because there hopefully are people watching this and are inspired by what you're doing, and will do something maybe non-traditional in their life because of things the way they were brought up, or the way things were for their history or people around them. And we're influenced a lot by those around us. Sometimes we just go along with what we're doing, right? I had Trey on here, Trey Williams on here a few days ago, and he was talking about people just sort of get into the monotony of doing something like a job without actually realizing why they're just doing what they're doing, right? And he wants to rescue people from 9 to 5 and send them out to be entrepreneurs. But it's more than just that. It's like, what's your mission? What's your real calling for something? And there's so many people that now I think can express, and there's a lot more outlets now. It could be good or bad with social media and outlets, but I appreciate that.
So can I interject with
Yeah.
a story about
Yeah.
that? Because that really, one of the most important things that I felt as a parent that I learned at 40 Carats was that our job as parents is to raise our kids to be the best version of themselves
Yeah.
and not to impose our wishes and beliefs on them. Obviously, instilling values and all of those things
Yeah.
is one thing, but my older daughter, Ani, sorry, hope you don't mind my using you as an example, but she's an artist. She has always had a phenomenal abilities in artistic endeavors, and she's super bright in every area. But that's where she goes. I mean, that is where her natural bent is, in creative arts. And there were family members in our family that really weren't supportive of that, and how painful that was for her when she wanted to do, everybody has to make their own path.
Yeah.
And make their own decisions. And having these conversations with my children as, older teens, and saying, you know what, this is your life. Here are the pitfalls I see.
Yeah.
Here are the fantastic things I see. But I'm a full believer that everybody should be happy doing what they're doing in general.
Sure.
And building to it. Have I had jobs that I've hated? Absolutely. Are there parts of my job I wish I didn't need to do? Sure. But that's along with the territory.
Yeah.
It's, looking at the big picture.
Yeah.
And where do you want to go? And what does make you feel fulfilled?
Sure.
I have to stop using the word happy, because it's not always just.
Yeah. Fulfillment.
It's not all about happy.
That made a big difference for me. I didn't really know what I was going to do. I thought I wanted to do one thing, and in college, and halfway through, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I'm good at this. Or do I want to do this? I'm not really connected to it as I thought I was. And then I exited out into the workforce with like zero direction. I'm like, I'll just learn things that feel like I should learn. Ended up learning finance, but then I was pulled over to tech and sales. And then I'm like, it's cool, it's great. But finding something that fulfilled you, right? It's like, and
But you have to try things to figure that out, right?
Like, it's hard to just, you don't know, right?
Right.
I do love that there's a little bit more exposure for younger people now to different things, because they can go out there and try things and see things, and hopefully podcasts and YouTube is there for them in the right ways. But it took me a while. I would say probably like my 30s, and I'm like, finally figured it out, or sort of figured it out, still figuring it out. But also you mentioned about leadership and people, about understanding them earlier, and that was something that took me a while to figure out. I had my own sort of, this is what we need to do mentality about things, and empathy was low on my radar for most things. And to be a real good leader, you have to be empathetic in the right ways to people, but in their best interests, and that's something where it was a big blind spot for me. But you mentioned it earlier about when you're leading all these people, and as a female in the workspace too, and helping, how are you being perceived by others? How are others perceiving you, to come across the right way and get what needs to get done. And in private business versus nonprofit, obviously a little bit different based on what's going on, but still, I think it's just as important. And most of the leaders that I've wanted to be around had high EQ, and not necessarily high IQ, but they were really good humans and cared a lot about what they were looking to accomplish. And I feel like you have both of those things. You have,
Well, I work hard at all of it every day.
Yeah.
And again, bringing in people who are smarter than you and know more than you and learning from them too.
Yeah.
I guess it's about, knowing that you don't know everything.
Yeah.
I know I don't know everything, but it is my job to make decisions, gather information, make the best possible decision that we can. You said something just now about nonprofits and private business being different. They are in many ways, but of course, business principles don't change.
Sure.
So all of those things we look at really carefully, and being financially responsible and sustainable is key, whether private or public.
Yeah.
And having folks, we are a nonprofit, and yes, you mentioned earlier about pay sometimes being an issue. We try to be super competitive because we do want the best people, both in education experience, but also in those personal attributes.
Yeah.
Because the services that we provide, because of this philosophy of non-judgment and meeting people where they are and being strength-based, and that empathy that you're speaking of, that runs through everything we do. And being able to deliver services and hear people's stories and accept where they are is really hard.
Sure.
And special people do that every day.
Yeah.
So I have huge respect for the people that I get to work with. Yeah. And I look at them and say, oh my gosh, I could never do that.
Yeah. No, all of your people, they're receiving so much of that. Maybe sometimes it's trauma, right? It's struggle. It's a mixture of things. It's a lot of emotions, and you have to have special people for that. So, and you all do. I've met a lot of your team over the course of the years, and you need special people for that. So that's awesome.
Yeah. We're breaking generational cycles.
Yeah.
Of negative relationships, and all those things that come along with that: drug abuse, incarceration, undereducation, teen parents. All of those things, really, we can make a difference as a society.
Yeah.
But we've got to invest more in earlier.
Yeah.
Earlier the better. Earlier is always the better.
And it's as early as birth. How early are we going for you guys?
Pregnancy and before. Preparing parents to be parents is also key. And as you've experienced yourself with your 3, how different and how hard it is. And every child is different, and everyone needs something different for themselves.
It's
and
a new
how
game
do you
every day.
balance that in your household?
You think you figured it out, and then the next day it's different. You're like, oh yeah, we figured this out. It's like, this is what the routine is going to be. No, it's not. It's
and then they change.
It's a roulette wheel every day.
Daily.
It's
yes.
like the lotto machine every day.
So parenting is hard. And part of the beauty of 40 Carats is also that community building. We have a huge community of folks who, just like myself, will say, oh my gosh, I met these people in a parenting class 25 years ago, and
Oh,
they're
wow.
still my friends today.
That's cool.
I have that all over the place. As a matter of fact, our new facility on Cattleman was built by Tandem Construction, and the president there is Brian Lever. And I
Yeah.
met Catherine, his wife, in a PIP class at 40 Carats in 2001.
Nice.
So it's this entire community of folks who really want to help everyone. But the reality is we all need help.
Yeah.
We
Everyone.
all need help in parenting.
And I'm like, we got this figured out. I'm like, we could really use some help. There's always something. And it's really about lifelong learning in all areas.
It is.
Sometimes you get sucked into I gotta be better in my craft, like in my trade, right? But there's also, you're a parent, you're doing other things, so it's lifelong learning in 360.
Always.
Yeah.
And you're a son or a
Yeah.
daughter
Yeah.
and a spouse.
Yeah.
And so managing all those relationships and keeping the eye on the ball of our kids. And all parents want their kids
Yeah.
to have a healthy, productive, happy life.
Sure.
And particularly if you didn't grow up with that, how do you do it? How do you even know that there's something different unless you're learning about it
Right.
and you're supported? And that's really what keeps me going.
That's awesome.
And makes this so exciting. And we're so thrilled to have this next bit of change for our organization. And as a leader, I think probably that's what I love best. Not change for change's sake,
Yeah.
but really intentional and well thought out plans to, how are we going to get over here to our really giant goals of, in 40 Carats case, our vision is for every child to be raised in a home where they're safe and protected and loved and nurtured and can grow into responsible, caring adults. And so those 6,000 people, that just keeps growing every year. So
that's awesome. And you have some large fundraising that goes along with all this to
Yes,
make
we
this
do.
all possible.
Yes.
Wine, Women, and Shoes being one of them, how we got connected originally. There was another gala, Firefly Gala. So tell us about some of the iterations of fundraising that have sort of come and gone, and then where we're going to make this, to really achieve that goal where every child and every family is affected.
Yeah, that's been really exciting for me too. And I think, again, my fortunate timing, not my choice. I just landed at 40 Carats at a time where it was on a trajectory. And so I didn't come into this job. I had a lot of the business skills. I had sales skills, which don't always translate into fundraising. But I was able to grow along with the organization. So when I took over in 2013, I think our budget was, 1.6, something like that. This year, we're looking at 5 million. So
Awesome.
obviously, the way we raise money had to change. And when I was a mom at 40 Carats and I was volunteering and fundraising, they had no development department. Parents did everything.
Oh, wow.
So you can just feel, the progression of what that looked like.
Sure.
So when I took over in 2013, there was a small development department. We actually still have a really small development department. They are small but mighty and do amazing things. But one of the charges from the board at that time was we need to diversify. We have 2 very major events that are bringing in a lot of our dollars, but we know events don't last forever.
Sure.
And we're also really fortunate to be able to net a good deal of money. Wine, Women, and Shoes netted $1 million.
That's awesome.
Not every fundraising event, makes that mark.
Yeah.
And it does take a lot of time and effort. So during those 10 years, we had Firefly, which of course was the brainchild of Ariane Dart, that she was on our board, and the Dart Foundation underwrote that. She wanted to create a new kind of event that would garner new interest in 40 Carats.
That's great.
And she did that with all the bands that came, and that was super fun.
Yeah, I think I went to the Pitbull concert.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was special.
it was special.
But they all were. So we
Yeah,
had 10 years of that.
yeah,
And we knew that that was a finite timeline.
sure.
But it was great because it gave us the internal ability to build up all those other revenue sources.
Yeah,
And so making relationships and stewarding our donors and making sure that they felt a part of the organization, as well as how much impact that their generosity is making
yeah,
and what we're doing. So we're spending a lot of time. I think that was a gift of COVID too.
mm.
We couldn't have either one of those events.
Oh
And
yeah,
what were we going to do? It was frightening. We were able to do it. And that was because of these relationships that we've built and people who have seen and have trust in the organization, and that we were going to make it through, and that we were going to continue to serve folks no
yeah,
matter how we had to find them
yeah.
and reach them and contact with them. So again, it's finding those
It's a
opportunities.
mighty feat because both of those events are highly concentrated with people all in one place. They're big events, right? To raise a lot of money, and where COVID, we couldn't do that, right? For you to continue to be able to press on and make it work. I mean, that is tremendous, right? I mean, so I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, it was hard.
Yeah.
And we were proud.
And a lot of planning goes in, like you said, to be able to net out a lot out of an event like that. A lot of planning. I mean, your team has already started planning. They started playing the day after the last event, I think. I got a text.
It's wrap up and then it's start.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like everyone's like, all right, I get to relax. Oh no, we're next day, we're in.
We are.
And it's a really, really tremendous event. I mean, I'm always impressed. And that's why I come back to dance.
But look at what we get. I mean, talk about community, right?
Yeah.
You're a soul man. You are a part of these 55 professional men who volunteer their time to come and help raise money and serve wine and have some fun for a good cause.
Yeah.
But that's a big deal.
Yeah.
And we can't do it without everyone involved. In total, I think we have 175 volunteers for that event.
That's awesome.
Again, that event also has, 8 or 9 ancillary events that go along with it. So it is a major feat. I think that's also one of the underappreciated aspects of nonprofit operations. Not only are we expected to be experts in the services we provide, but we're also expected to be experts in throwing really fantastic, profitable parties.
Yeah.
And
the real party
raising
animals,
funds.
nonprofit.
Yeah, it's hard to do
Right?
that.
Yeah. I think gala season in this town is just weekend to weekend. It's just one and the other and the other. Yeah. Back to back, just parties throughout the entire season.
I know.
But it gets the job done, and a lot of people that are really supportive of what they care about and in their own vein, and it's really great. And I wouldn't have had any sort of connection to 40 Carats had it not been for like, hey, there's a table at this event, come dance. And I'm like, I don't know what this is. Like, and then fast forward now, I think it's like 10 years, knowing and be able to share the resources too with others, because I talk to a lot of people on a daily basis that are parents, and
Right.
and we all face the same sort of struggles that we're like, okay, we're trying to balance a career and family and marriage and these wildlings and how to be the best you can be. So, it's any way to get the word out and connect with new people. And, for me too, relationships have been great. I think I met 4 or 5 people as a soul man in 2012 that I'm really good friends with now. That's where we met, and then we ran into each other throughout, other things we did in the town or around other places. But we had a really good connection there because of what we were doing together. And, we can say we're friends now, and that's really, really cool. Right. So the relationship piece has always been big for me. I think that's where I found like, that's what I love to do is relationships and, be out and meet people. But you just never know who you're going to run into and how it's going to affect your life.
No, I love that story, and that I love hearing that. And of course, at that time, you didn't have your own family,
No,
and now you have 3 children of your
I
own.
was just a post grad running around, not sure what I was doing. I was like, yeah, I don't know. I'm supposed to be an engineer, but I'm not doing that. So,
And look at you now. I know.
I was like,
And you're still here.
I'll figure it out.
Supporting 40 Carats. So thank you.
Yeah.
And your own family. It's beautiful. Yeah.
Any good books? Any books that you feel like you'd recommend? Obviously, 40 Carats is a tremendous resource for what you do outside of this area, or if someone's looking for, maybe it's just developmental in general. Maybe it's family-based or parenting skills. Any things you recommend that people look up?
Oh, there's so many. I would recommend actually going to our website. We have a lot of resources there, depending on the age of your children.
And we'll link that in the show notes for sure.
Thank you. And I think one of the other things that's really unique about 40 Carats is that we have services that run the entire gamut of child development. So from pregnancy all the way up through age 18, and sometimes after age 18 for folks who have been our clients, especially through the transition to college. Sometimes that can be really tough. And so we have all of those resources all the way. And it's really one of the challenges in staffing is also because we have experts in different areas. So we have experts in maternal health and postpartum work, and talking about relationships. I mean, we as humans, we're wired for relationships.
Yeah.
When you talk about failure to thrive for kids who are severely neglected, their brains are actually smaller than kids who have normal, healthy, loving relationships. It actually impacts your body. It impacts the brain development. And as parents, if we have no idea what's appropriate for certain ages, that's what makes things really, really hard. And if you think that your 18-month-old is going to stop touching the television after, after you tell them the first or second or third time or 100th time, but understanding that they're learning and that discipline is teaching.
Yeah.
And no, discipline does not necessarily have to mean punitive or harsh, and you can still have very strong boundaries, which kids need. For sure.
Yeah.
And so it's just fascinating. I find it fascinating. I learn something new every single day from our people at 40 Carats. And I think, oh my gosh, I should have done that when my kids were smaller. But guess what? I can do it now.
Yeah.
I mean, none of this, none of the learnings is really just about children. It's really about humans.
Sure.
So, I find it fascinating. And neuroscience these days is incredible.
Right.
And what's coming out of all the neuroscience research is only going to make all of us better if we listen.
Yeah, there's a lot coming out there. It always boggles my mind when it's like, oh, there's something new that we didn't know before. Yeah.
Yes.
In that space.
And we love hearing the new research that comes out that validates our process and how we operate.
Sure.
Because it is, again, down to relationships, and we have to create trust. If we don't have trust in one another, learning doesn't happen one way or another.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing all this.
I feel privileged. Thank you for asking me.
It's so important. It's a great organization, 40 Carats, and what you're doing, Michelle,
Thank you.
making an impact in the community, connecting people, making sure that I'm hanging out with the good people on 40 Carats family. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Supporting, and thank you for spreading the word.
Yeah, of course.
Really appreciate you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you. This has been the Leaders and Legends podcast, hosted by me, Michael Calamaras. Subscribe so you get notified when the next episode drops. Share the show and spread the love. We really appreciate it.